Step into the haunting world of Vampire Hunter D, where shadows rule and humanity clings to survival. This deep dive video uncovers the untold story of D, the last Dhampir, born from the forbidden union of a human and the legendary vampire ancestor. From his mysterious origins and supernatural powers to his cursed solitude and endless battles against the nobles, discover why D remains one of the most complex and fascinating characters in dark fantasy. In this video you'll learn the hidden origins of Vampire Hunter D and his true lineage, the post-apocalyptic world where humans and nobles clash, D's incredible powers, from immortal strength to superhuman senses, the cursed duality of his human heart and vampire blood. Why D's story is more than horror, it's a timeless reflection on identity, loneliness, and redemption. If you've ever wondered who Vampire Hunter D truly is, and why his legend endures after decades, this is the video for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into vampire legends, anime classics, and forgotten stories from the shadows. The world has always feared the dark. From the earliest cave fires to the neon glow of modern cities, humanity has fought against the shadows, believing that in the blackness of night lurk predators waiting to consume us. Yet there is something poetic in that fear, a recognition that darkness is not only the absence of light, but also the reflection of our deepest inner struggles. Now imagine a future where that fear becomes reality. The old world crumbled in flames long ago. Nuclear fire scarred the earth. Humanity's cities became graveyards, and from those ruins, creatures who had always lived in whispers and legends emerged to claim dominion. Vampires immortal, aristocratic, and merciless rose from their crypts and castles to become emperors of ash and shadow. And yet, even in this hopeless night, one solitary figure writes. His name is short, sharp, a whisper that carries through barren towns and forgotten roads. D, a hunter of immortals, a savior feared as much as the monsters he slays, a paradox wrapped in black leather and silence. But what makes him so compelling is not only the enemies he destroys, but the battle raging within him. For D is not fully human, nor entirely vampire. He's something else entirely. Last Dhampir, half predator, half prey. Born of an impossible union, he's the embodiment of contradiction, strength and fragility, mercy and cruelty, solitude and belonging. The story of D is not simply one of horror or action. It is a story of identity, what it means to straddle two worlds and belong to neither. It is the tale of carrying a burden you never chose, yet choosing to bear it with dignity. And perhaps it is also about us. Think about it. Who among us hasn't felt torn between two worlds? Children of immigrants who speak one language at home and another at school. People of mixed heritage walking the line between cultures. Or even those who simply feel out of place, caught between expectations and desires, between who they are and who they're told to be. That's what makes D more than just a character in an anime or a novel. He's a mirror, and through his long ride across haunted lands, we begin to see reflections of our own silent battles. So in this journey, let's dive deeper into who he truly is. We'll go beyond the legends whispered in villages and beyond the swords flashing under moonlight. We'll look at his mysterious birth, his long solitude, the powers that make him a god among men, and the quiet humanity that keeps him from becoming a monster himself. And maybe, by the end, we'll uncover why his story, one drenched in blood, loss, and eternal twilight, still resonates so deeply today. Because sometimes, the monsters we fear the most are the parts of ourselves we can't escape. Every legend has a beginning, though some are buried under layers of mystery and deliberate silence. These origins are whispered, debated, and speculated upon, but never fully confirmed. And perhaps that makes them even more powerful. Thus, the shadows of uncertainty only make the myth grow stronger. At the height of vampire rule, the world belonged to the nobles. These were not the blood drinkers of folk horror, skulking in graveyards. No, these were overlords of science and sorcery, their immortal lives stretching across centuries, building palaces of technology on the ashes of human civilization. To them, humans were cattle for labor, food, or amusement. And then something unthinkable happened. The most powerful of them all, the sacred ancestor, whom any whisper to be none other than Dracula himself, fell in love with a human woman. Or perhaps, as some scholars argue, it wasn't love at all. Perhaps it was an experiment, a deliberate attempt to blend human resilience with vampire immortality. Perhaps Dee's birth was meant to be a weapon or a breakthrough in genetics, not a testament of affection. But whether born of love or design, the result was the same, a child that should not exist. Dee entered the world carrying two legacies that had never before mixed. From his father, he inherited near immortality, supernatural strength, and the commanding presence of a vampire lord. From his mother, he inherited the ability to walk in daylight and, more importantly, the fragile thread of human compassion. Imagine the weight of such a birthright. To be born with the power of a god, yet the heart of a mortal. To be destined for greatness, yet rejected by both sides. For the vampires, Dee was an abomination. His very existence was a slap in the face to centuries of tradition, proof that their supposedly pure blood could be diluted. For the humans, he was just as terrifying, carried the scent of their oppressors, the fangs hidden behind his lips, the unnatural perfection of his face that made them shiver rather than trust. So from the moment he first opened his eyes, Dee was condemned to walk alone. This duality is state of in-betweenness, something many of us can relate to. Think of people who grow up in borderlands of culture, race, or belief. They're told they're too much of one thing, not enough of another. They don't fit neatly into categories, and so society mistrusts them. And yet, history shows us that it is often these people, outsiders, hybrids, bridges between worlds, will shape the future. Just as Dee does, the image of his mother is rarely recorded. Her name was erased from history, as though the nobles feared even the memory of her existence. But in the scarce fragments that remain, she was described as a woman of extraordinary beauty and unshakable resolve. Think about that. To draw the attention of Dracula himself, to carry his child, and to face the consequences just of being a figure of quiet strength. And perhaps it was her humanity that gave Dee his compass. We cannot know for certain, but when you look at the way he chooses to live, you see her influence in every choice. He could have embraced his vampiric inheritance and ruled as a lord among nobles. Instead, he rides against them, blade drawn. That feels less like destiny and more like love for the woman who gave him life, and whose memory fuels his defiance. There's a story I once heard about a soldier who survived war and returned home, haunted by what he had seen. When asked what kept him alive in moments of despair, he didn't mention duty or orders. He said simply, "I kept hearing my mother's voice, telling me I was more than what the war tried to make me." That's Dee, haunted by the pull of his vampire blood, yet remembering the fragile, human voice of his mother, and in that memory, he chooses who he will be. In a world where children are often defined by the sins of their parents, Dee stands as proof that lineage does not dictate destiny. He is both heir to Dracula's power and betrayer of it, both victim of his birth and master of his fate. That is the paradox of his identity and the spark that ignites his legend. A child born of two worlds rarely grows up with the luxury of belonging to either. For Dee, his early life was shaped in secrecy, silence, and solitude. Whispers suggest that his father's sacred ancestor did not abandon him outright. Some records claim the boy was raised under direct supervision, schooled in the ancient arts of the nobility, trained in combat by masters whose names have long since faded into dust. Others say he was hidden away, raised in remote fortresses or underground sanctuaries, where his existence would remain a secret from both humans and vampires alike. What we do know is this: his training was relentless. Imagine a childhood where play was replaced with discipline. Instead of laughter, there were the clashing echoes of steel. Instead of lullabies, lessons in language, science, and strategy. From a young age, Dee mastered not only swordsmanship, but also the mathematics of warfare, the sciences of vampiric biology, and the forgotten histories of both species. But knowledge, no matter how vast, cannot shield a child from loneliness. Isolation is a cruel teacher. Even as his skills grew sharper than the blade he carried, Dee was forged in silence. He was too human to be fully accepted by the aristocratic vampires, too vampire to walk among human children without stares of dread. Imagine the eyes of those around him, always watching, always questioning, never trusting. That sort of gaze seeps into your skin and carves itself into your bones. And so, Dee grew quiet, reserved, stoic. His expression became a mask not just of discipline, but of protection. Silence was not just his habit, it was his armor. In this way, his early years remind me of stories told by real-world martial arts apprentices. I once read about a boy in Japan who trained under his grandfather in swordsmanship. The boy practiced alone, hour after hour, in an empty courtyard, repeating the same motions until his muscles moved without thought. When he grew older, he admitted, "The sword was my only friend. It was the only thing that didn't look at me with suspicion." Doesn't that sound like Dee? His no-dodges impossibly long blade wasn't merely a weapon. It was a companion, perhaps the only one who would never betray him. But the cruelest part of his upbringing was not the isolation itself. It was the growing awareness that no matter how strong, how disciplined, how skilled he became, he would never belong. Vampires despised his diluted blood. Humans feared the predator hidden in his veins. His very existence was a paradox the world refused to accept. And yet, this rejection became the crucible that shaped him. Outsiders often grow into one of two paths. They either bend themselves desperately to belong, or they forge themselves into something entirely new. Dee chose the latter. He embraced his role as neither human nor vampire, but something beyond both. A rider in the twilight. A figure meant to dwell on the edges. It is this self-forged identity honed in isolation, tempered in rejection, that made him strong enough to become a hunter feared by monsters themselves. And maybe there's a lesson for us there, too. Loneliness is painful, but sometimes it becomes the soil in which strength grows. The child who eats alone becomes the adult who learns to stand alone. The boy who speaks only to his sword becomes the man whose silence is more terrifying than any battle cry. To understand Dee, we must understand the world he inhabits. It is not merely a backdrop for his story, it is a mirror reflecting the themes of survival, oppression, and fragile hope. Millennia before, the Earth suffered what history calls the Great Destruction, a global nuclear catastrophe that civilization, wiping away cities, nations, and technologies we once believed eternal. Humanity crawled out of the ashes, broken, scattered, and vulnerable, and from the shadows, the noblest vampire stepped forth, no longer bound to secrecy. Imagine the terror of waking to a sky filled with ash, the air thick with radiation, only to find that the masters of your nightmares were now kings of reality. That was the dawn of noble rule. The nobles did what they had always done best. They ruled. With their centuries of knowledge, their hardened sciences, their eternal patience, they built glittering cities atop the ruins of the old world. To them, humanity was not a partner in rebuilding, but a resource. Cattle, servants, sometimes companions, but never equals. And yet, as centuries passed, even the dominion of vampires began to wane. They ruled less openly, their numbers shrinking, their influence concentrated in isolated castles and strongholds. Still, the shadow loomed over human settlements like a ghost that refused to die. This world is not a simple division between humans and vampires. It is a complex hierarchy. At the top sit the dwindling nobles, ancient yet powerful. Beneath them are privileged human stows who willingly serve in exchange for safety, wealth, or status. Below them, common people scrape together survival in fortified towns, forever balancing gratitude and suspicion toward the Dhampirs and hunters who protect them. And where does Dee fit? Nowhere. Vampire hunters like him are paradoxical figures. Humans rely on them desperately. They are the only defense against noble predation, the only reason villages do not vanish in the night. Yet those same humans shun them. Hunters are seen as tainted, too close to the monsters they kill. And Dee, being half vampire himself, carries that stigma multiplied. Imagine walking into a town after saving its children from being abducted, only to be met with fearful stares and whispered prayers to keep you away. That is Dee's life. Gratitude without acceptance, need without trust. It is hauntingly similar to the way societies often treat their protectors in the real world. Soldiers return from wars, carrying scars both visible and invisible, only to find that civilians cannot look them in the eye. Police officers, firefighters, Dr. Stows who walk daily with death are both relied upon and held at arm's length. Dee embodies a contradiction. But perhaps the most tragic part of this ravaged world is not its ruins or its predators. It is the fact that humanity itself sometimes chooses servitude. Many humans willingly side with nobles, believing that protection under a monster is safer than freedom in the wilderness. It's a bitter truth. When survival is at stake, morality bends. And in that bending, the nobles thrive. This is the backdrop against which Dee rides. Not a shining battlefield of good versus evil, but a twilight world of compromises, betrayals, and uneasy alliances. His sword doesn't just cut down monsters, it slices through the grey fog of a society that has forgotten what freedom feels like. And yet, every time Dee arrives in a village, hope stirs. People may fear him, but they also cling to him, because in a world ruled by shadows, even a shadow can be a source of light. What makes Dee more than a legend is not simply his sword or his silent sight, is the impossible body he inhabits, a vessel where two heritages collide. From his vampiric lineage, he carries strength beyond comprehension. Witnesses describe him lifting stone walls with one hand, shattering boulders with a flick of his wrist. In battle, he moves with such velocity that the human eye cannot follow. Villagers whisper of duels, where foes fall before they even realize they've been struck, their final memory a blur of silver light. That Dee's power is not brute force alone, it is resilience. His wounds heal in moments, his body regenerating tissues, bones, even organs that would kill a normal man. Poison cannot hold him, fire cannot consume him, death itself seems to hesitate before his presence. And yet this is where the paradox deepens. Unlike pure-blooded vampires, Dee can walk in the daylight. The sun, bane of his kin, does not reduce him to ash. He's free to ride beneath its warmth, though at a cost. Prolonged exposure drains him, leaving him weak, lethargic, vulnerable. It is a reminder that even his greatest gifts come with edges of pain. His senses are equally beyond mortal measure. Dee can hear a heartbeat from across a battlefield, smell blood spilled miles away, and see in darkness as clearly as others see in dawn. Beyond the physical, his perception stretches into realms unseen, detecting disturbances in reality itself when supernatural forces stir. But perhaps his most astonishing trait is longevity. 5,000 years he has walked, yet his face is that of a man in his prime. Time itself seems unable to claim him. Imagine that 5 millennia of learning, practicing, perfecting, every skill sharpened to diamond edge, every battle another lesson etched into memory. No wonder he feels less like a man and more like an elemental force. Time has had centuries to refine him. And yet here lies the haunting truth. Longevity does not guarantee joy. Imagine living centuries while watching every human you ever touch wither and die. Imagine walking through ruins of cities you saw thriving in your youth. Immortality is not a gift, it is a slow unraveling of hope. We see echoes of this in real life, don't we? Think of aging parents who outlive their children, or veterans who survive wars but cannot escape the ghosts of fallen comrades. They live on, but each day feels like carrying a cemetery within their chest. Dee carries this on a cosmic scale. For every year we live, he lives 100. For every goodbye we endure, he endures 1,000. This is why his powers are as tragic as they are awe-inspiring. To others, he is untouchable, godlike, invincible. But to himself, he is condemned, powerful enough to protect humanity, yet cursed to stand apart from it. And maybe that's why he rides. Not because he enjoys the hunt, but because standing still means facing the unbearable silence of immortality. His blade is not only a weapon, it is a distraction, a way to keep moving, to keep from drowning in memory. If his body is a weapon, his arsenal is an extension of his will. Every hunter knows that raw power without preparation is recklessness. D, shaped by centuries of battle, embodies this truth. At the heart of his arsenal lies the no-dacia blade, so long it borders on the impossible for ordinary men to wield. Forged by techniques lost to time, it is said to combine vampiric metallurgy with ancient human craftsmanship. Its edge slices through steel, stone, flesh, anything. To D, it is not merely a tool, but an extension of himself, moving with liquid precision, as though it breathes with him. Eyewitnesses describe its arcs as flashes of silver lightning, the final sight of countless foes. But his sword is only the beginning. Hidden in his long black coat are weapons designed for every scenario. Silver daggers that sear through noble flesh, enchanted wooden stakes that pierce even regenerating hearts, vials of consecrated water that burn like acid upon contact, each item meticulously maintained, polished, and positioned for instant use. What makes his arsenal extraordinary is not just the items themselves, but the way he wields them. D is a strategist. He never enters combat blindly. Like a chess master, he considers every possibility, every contingency. He knows when to rely on brute force, when to exploit an enemy's arrogance, when to strike with steel, and when to turn to subtler tools. His tactics blend human martial traditions with vampiric techniques long thought forgotten. Imagine a warrior who can wield samurai sword forms, assassin stealth, and superhuman abilities that defy physics, all in seamless unity. Watching him fight is less like watching a duel and more like watching a storm. Precise, overwhelming, inescapable. And yet, his greatest weapon is not in his coat, nor his sword, nor even his vampiric powers. It is his mind. D studies his enemies with surgical coldness. He reads them like open books, identifying their weaknesses before the first strike. He exploits fear, provokes hesitation, manipulates emotions. His silence is not accidental, it is tactical. By saying nothing, he forces opponents to drown in their own doubt. Many of his victories are won before the blade ever swings. This psychological mastery reminds me of legendary generals throughout history. Sun Tzu wrote that the greatest victory is to defeat the enemy without fighting. D lives this truth. His stillness unnerves, his presence unsettles. The foe who underestimates him already dead, they just don't know it yet. To illustrate this, picture a scene. A group of mercenaries, hired by a desperate noble, surround D in the ruins of an abandoned cathedral. They outnumber him 20-1. They sneer, jeer, mock his silence. But then his eyes meet their scum, unblinking, filled with an eternity they cannot comprehend. One mercenary shifts nervously. Another drops his weapon, hands trembling. Before the battle begins, their courage fractures, and when the first silver flash arcs through the air, the fight is already lost. This is why D is feared not only as a warrior, but as a myth. His arsenal is not just steel and silver, it is the aura of inevitability. To face him is not to fight a man, it is to fight inevitability itself. Battles are often romanticized in stories. The clash of steel, the roar of warriors, the chaos of destruction. But for D, combat is not chaos, it is precision. It is art. To watch him fight is not to witness random strikes, but to see a philosophy unfold. Every movement is deliberate, every action honed by centuries of refinement. There is no wasted swing, no unnecessary gesture. D embodies the essence of lethal economy. Do only what must be done, and nothing more. This economy of motion comes not only from his supernatural gifts, but from his psychological mastery. He understands that combat begins long before the first blow is struck. Fear is the most potent weapon, and D wields it with terrifying skill. Think about it. Silence is unsettling. When someone refuses to respond, refuses to react, it creates a vacuum that our minds rush to fill. In that vacuum, doubt breeds. Opponents look at D, at his stillness, his unblinking gaze, and they begin to unravel. Their hearts race, their hands sweat, they second-guess themselves before they even raise their weapons. This is not unique to D. History is filled with warriors who understood that intimidation is half the battle. Samurai once polished their armor until it gleamed like fire, dazzling enemies under the sun. Generals like Hannibal used elephants not merely as weapons, but as instruments of terror, massive shadows that broke armies before the spears did. Even in modern times, sports champions often win by strength alone, but by aurate psychological edge that makes an opponent hesitate. D does not need polish, or beasts, or noise. He has silence. And silence is more terrifying than any roar. There's a story told among villages. A noble once sent a band of killers to ambush D at dusk. They circled him, weapons drawn, grinning at their advantage. But D did nothing. He stood still, his sword untouched, his face unreadable. One of the men laughed nervously, then cursed, demanding he fight. Still, D did nothing. Seconds stretched into eternity, and then, without warning, one by one, they faltered. The leader backed away, muttering, until finally, panic broke them. When they fled, only then did D move, striking down the last two who dared remain. He never shouted. He simply waited. And in the waiting, he won. What makes his philosophy remarkable is that it's not born from arrogance, but from discipline. D knows that his power, if unleashed recklessly, could consume him. His silence, his precision, his restraint are chains he places upon himself to ensure he remains master of his bloodlust rather than its victim. And here, we see a lesson that resonates even outside his story. How many of our own conflicts, arguments, rivalries, confrontations are won not by who shouts the loudest, but by who stays calm? How often does silence cut deeper than words? D reminds us that mastery is not about unleashing all your strength, it is about knowing when not to. So when we speak of D's combat philosophy, we are not merely describing techniques of war, we are describing a worldview. To fight with economy, to command with silence, to strike only when necessary, that is the discipline of a man who has fought not only enemies, but himself. Yet for all his silence, for all his control, there lies within D a storm he cannot fully suppress. The truth is, he is half vampire. No matter how tightly he chains his impulses, no matter how carefully he disciplines himself, that blood still whispers in his veins. In moments of extreme danger, when wounds cut deep and survival hangs by a thread, the monster within him awakens. Witnesses describe transformations both terrifying and awe-inspiring. His eyes blaze crimson, his fangs lengthen, and an aura radiates from him, oppressive, suffocating, paralyzing all who stand near. Shadows bend to his will, creatures of the night answer his call, and his strength surges beyond comprehension. In these moments, D is no longer the silent rider. He is the storm itself, unrestrained, merciless. But with every such transformation comes a cost, for in those brief minutes, his humanity slips away, compassion dulls, empathy fades, and what remains is the predator his father intended him to be. When the battle ends, and the crimson fades from his eyes, D retreats into solitude, punishing himself with silence and ritual, as if to cleanse the taint of what he has unleashed. This is the tragedy of his existence. He fights not only monsters outside, but the monster within. We see reflections of this struggle in ourselves. How many of us suppress parts of who we injure? Jealousy, fearfully for them to erupt when we are pushed too far. Think of someone who prides themselves on patience, only to explode in rage when tested, or someone who seems endlessly compassionate, yet in a moment of betrayal, lashes out with cruelty they didn't know they had. D's struggle is universal. He is simply the most extreme version of it. His monster is not metaphorical, it is real, tangible, fanged. But it is the same storm we all carry. The battle between who we are, who we want to be, and what our instincts demand. And perhaps what makes him heroic is not that he suppresses the monster entirely because he cannot, but that he chooses, again and again, to return to the side of humanity. He could give in. He could embrace the vampire within, rise as a lord of shadows, and rule the world with unchallenged might. No one could stop him. And yet he refuses. He chooses exile, He chooses burden. He chooses the lonely road of the hunter. This is not a weakness. It is the highest form of strength, to hold immense power and still say no. There is a story from medieval Europe of a knight who carried a sword said to be cursed. It was sharper than any other, but whenever drawn, it drove its wielder into bloodlust. The knight used it only in dire moments, and each time he did, he would retreat to a monastery afterward, fasting and praying, begging forgiveness for the lives taken. In this knight, we see a faint echo of the blade, the blood, the endless penance. But unlike the knight, D has no monastery, no priest to absolve him. His only absolution is the endless road. Each ride into a new town, each battle fought for humanity's survival, is another form of penance, not for sins committed, but for the sin of his very existence. This, more than anything else, is what makes him tragic. He's not only a hunter of vampires, he is a hunter of himself. Every strike he delivers to a noble is a symbolic strike against the vampire within his own blood. Every monster slain is another whisper silenced, and yet he never wins that war. For the monster will always return. But maybe that is what makes him truly human, because isn't that our reality as well? We never fully silence our darker impulses. We learn to live with them, control them, and resist them. We stumble, fall, and rise again. And in that endless cycle, we find meaning. So too does D. For centuries, D has walked the earth not as a conqueror, not as a lord, but as a solitary rider. Wherever he goes, he is both needed and rejected. Villagers pay him to hunt the nightmares that stalk them, and yet, when the work is done, they avert their eyes. Children hide behind their mothers. Doors close. Prayers are whispered not in gratitude, but in fear that he will linger too long. This cycle has repeated for 5,000 years, a thankless rhythm of blood, silence, and departure. And yet, D continues. Why? Some scholars of his legend argue that his path is one of vengeance effort by hunting nobles. He symbolically strikes at the father who cursed him with this duality. Others believe it is penance, that he sees his vampiric blood as a sin he must atone for by saving those who would otherwise despise him. Still others claim it is simply duty, an acknowledgement that with great power comes the responsibility to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But when you look at him at the calm, silent dignity with which he rides into every forsaken villageite, feels deeper than vengeance, deeper than duty. It feels like a choice. The nobility believe blood is destiny, that lineage defines identity. But D's living proof that destiny can be defied. Every time he lifts his blade against the nobles, he's not only saving humanity, he's rejecting the idea that he must be what his father was. And in that rejection lies redemption. Yet it is a lonely redemption. Unlike the heroes of other legends, D has no companions who celebrate with him after battle, no family waiting in the next town. His only constant is the road stretching endlessly ahead, and the cursed voice of the parasite in his left hand, half companion, half tormentor. The bond between them is as strange as it is telling. Even his closest ally is not human, but another supernatural anomaly. This solitude is not simply circumstance, it is also necessity. For how could he ever allow himself closeness, knowing that everyone he touches will wither and die long before his journey ends? To love would be to doom himself to heartbreak, century after century. To stay would be to watch friends age, while he remains unchanged. So he rides, always rides. I am reminded of stories of wandering ronin in feudal Japan, mysterious samurai who drifted from town to town, offering their blades for protection, always moving on before attachment could root. Or the lone gunslingers of the American West, riding into towns to face injustice, only to vanish once order was restored. These archetypes all share a truth. Solitude is both curse and armor. D wears his solitude like armor, and yet, within that solitude, there is a quiet nobility. He does not complain. He does not rage against his fate. He simply continues, his actions louder than any words. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson of his story. Redemption does not always come with applause. Sometimes it comes in silence, in the lonely choice to keep doing what is right, even if no one ever thanks you for it. As the sun sets on yet another of Dee's endless journeys, we are left with a figure who is not quite hero, not quite monster, something in between. His legend has endured not because of his powers, or even his victories, but because of what he represents. Dee embodies the paradox of humanity itself. We are creatures of duality, compassion and cruelty, light and shadow, hope and despair. Like Dee, we are never purely one thing. We carry contradictions within us, and it is in how we navigate those contradictions that our true selves emerge. Dee's story tells us that identity is not dictated by bloodline, fate, or the whispers of those who fear us. Identity is forged in choice. He was born with the blood of the greatest predator in history, yet he chooses to be a protector. He was cursed with immortality, yet he chooses to spend it defending mortals. He was abandoned by both worlds, yet he chooses to carry both upon his shoulders. And in that choice lies the power of redemption. It is easy to imagine that Dee's tale is one of darkness, tragedy, and despair. But if you look closer, it is also a tale of hope. Hope that even in the deepest night, someone will ride forth to protect the helpless. Hope that no matter what blood flows in your veins, you are not doomed by it. Hope that even monsters can choose to be something more. This is why his story resonates across cultures and generations, because all of us, in some way, are like him. We wrestle with impulses we wish we didn't have. We carry burdens we never asked for. We stand at the crossroads of who we are and who we could become. And like Dee, we must choose. Do we let our darker impulses define us? Or do we, day after day, ride forward, choosing the harder road of compassion, discipline, and self-mastery? Dee's answer is silence, but his actions speak. The hardest road is the noblest. As the credits of his legend roll, we see him again riding alone across desolate plains, horizon glowing with the promise of another sunrise. The villagers he saved will remember him as a shadow, a whisper, a fleeting presence. But we, as witnesses to his journey, know the truth. His solitude is not emptiness. It is sacrifice, and in that sacrifice there is beauty, because sometimes the greatest heroes are not the ones who bask in glory, but the ones who disappear into the horizon, leaving only the echo of hope behind. Final takeaway for the audience: you are not defined by your blood, your past, or your burdens. You are defined by your choices. Like Dee, you can walk with shadows and still choose to be light.